Now that we've talked about banks and writing checks and credit cards, we're going to talk about creating a budget. There's lots of different ways for you to create a budget. However, regardless of what type of method you're using, we're going to go ahead and there's really four main steps. The first that you want to look at is what are all your fixed expenses. So maybe you have a house payment that's the same each month. You have a car payment that's the same each month. Then you also want to list out any of your variable expenses. So maybe it's your food, your groceries. You like to go out with your friends, so you have a budget for fun. You have one for household. So things you need to get for your house, napkins, plates, laundry detergent, those kind of things. Then you want to determine how much your income is, and then from there you can go ahead and you can create a budget. So over the next few days, we're going to be looking at different types of budgets. And so we're going to look at two different ways right now to calculate budget categories. So some people use suggested percents for categories to budget. So if you Google budgeting, a lot of times they'll come up with a list of percents. And then people take whatever it is that their income for the month is, and then they can go ahead and they can calculate how much they should be spending on that. So for example, if this person has $3,000 and you're going to use the following budget categories to determine how much you should spend. So for housing, they're going to spend 25% of their monthly budget. So if they have $3,000 and they are going to use 25% of it for housing, then that means their rent or their mortgage or whatever, they should only be spending $750 a month. For food, they're going to take that same thing. They're going to do 3,000 times 20%. And they're going to be spending $600 a month for food. And so really this kind of depends on the person and the family. You might think $600 a month is a lot for food. But think about what your food budget is going to entail. First of all, is this a family? Is this just an individual? Is it just a married couple? Are you including going out to eat too in this food budget, or is it strictly your grocery budget? So then that kind of varies from person to person. So then people might have a clothing budget. And so they'll say, okay, well, that'll be 10% of our budget. And so we'll spend $300. Other people will spend, some money on transportation. And so transportation, that could include your gas for the month. Again, we just did that calculation, so that would be $300. Our fun budget, so maybe that's a separate category you have for going out, whether that's going out to dinner or going out to the movies or whatever the case may be. So we already calculated that when we calculated the food because it was 20%. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay, we have $600 for that. We should have some money going towards our savings. It was 10%. We calculated what 10% was already. And so that's $300. And then any medical expenses that we might have. So we'll have $3,000 times 5%. And so $150. So with these budget categories, they kind of give people an idea of how much they should be spending. And if they're spending more than that, then maybe they need to cut back on their spending, or they need to cut back in another category so that they can afford things. So for example, your housing, you kind of really can't decide how much your mortgage company is going to charge you once you've purchased a house. But, I can decide how much that I'm actually going to spend on going out to eat and whatnot. So if I have to cut back there so that I can afford my mortgage payment, then that's something that I need to take a look at. Some people budget based off of trends in their spending. So they'll kind of track how much they're spending for a few weeks or a few months or whatever, and then budget from there. So for example, if this person was looking at their food budget, they could go ahead and they could say, well, I spent $250 and $300 and then $275. Maybe these are like 2-week periods. So then they'd say, okay, well, if I add all those up, I'm going to get $825. And if I divide by the 3 2-week periods that we have, that means my food budget should be about $275 every 2 weeks. Or same thing with gas. Maybe, this is every 2 weeks, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's a month, just depending on what type of vehicle you're having, how much you're driving, how far you have to drive, and whatnot. So if we went ahead and we totaled up how much this person spent on gas for these 3 periods, and they spent $323, and we divide, so they'd say, okay, well, my gas budget is $107.67, so maybe they might say that our gas budget is a little over $100 if we were estimating. But if we want exact budget numbers, this is what we would use.